The chandelier cast fractured light across the marble floor of the Grand Council chamber, its crystals older than most civilizations. Lady Seraphine Nightshade stood before the assembled elders, her crimson gown flowing like blood across the ancient stone. Her silver eyes, characteristic of the oldest bloodlines, remained steady despite the weight of a dozen ancient gazes upon her. "You understand what you propose is impossible," Elder Malachus stated, his voice like grinding stone. His face bore the weathering of 3 millennia, pale skin stretched over sharp features that had forgotten how to show mercy centuries ago. Seraphine's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I understand that I am proposing we examine laws written in a different age, for different circumstances." A ripple of disapproval moved through the chamber. Council member Vespera hissed, her fangs extending slightly. "Different circumstances? Child, our laws exist because humans and our kind cannot coexist in the manner you suggest. They are cattle, prey, at best, servants. The boundaries exist for good reason." "Then let me present those reasons," Seraphine countered, her voice gaining strength. "Let us debate them openly rather than hide behind tradition." This was not how Seraphine had imagined spending her 237th year. She had been groomed since awakening into her immortal life to take her place among the council, to uphold the ancient ways, to ensure the survival and secrecy of vampire kind. She had studied the texts, memorized the laws, and understood the delicate balance that kept their species hidden from human awareness. And then she had met Dorian Ashford. It had been 6 months ago, at a charity gala in Manhattan. Seraphine had attended as part of her cover, playing the role of a wealthy European heiress, as she had done for decades. These events were useful for maintaining connections in human society, for identifying potential feeding sources among the corrupt and cruel, and for keeping a finger on the pulse of mortal affairs. Dorian had been there representing his independent bookstore, which had recently published a collection of translated Eastern European folklore. She had noticed him immediately, not because of his appearance, though his dark curly hair and warm brown eyes were pleasant enough, but because of his energy. In a room full of pretense and performance, he radiated genuine curiosity and kindness. "The stories are fascinating," he had said to her after she'd commented on his work. "But what strikes me most is how every culture has similar tales. Creatures that exist between life and death, predators that look human but aren't. It makes you wonder if the universality of the myth points to something deeper in the human psyche, or—" He had paused, a slight smile playing at his lips, "or if perhaps our ancestors weren't entirely delusional." Seraphine had been intrigued despite herself. Most humans who dabbled in vampire lore were either dangerously obsessed or dismissively skeptical. Dorian seemed to exist in a thoughtful middle ground, academically curious but not consumed. They had talked for hours that night, discussing literature, mythology, and the ways stories shape human understanding. Seraphine had been careful as always, but found herself enjoying the conversation in a way she hadn't experienced in decades. When he'd asked if he could see her again, she had agreed before considering the implications. "Lady Seraphine," Elder Malachus's voice pulled her back to the present. "You still have not answered my question. Why do you believe this human is worth disrupting millennia of law?" Seraphine took an unnecessary breath, a remnant habit from her human days. "Because he challenges every assumption we've made about humans. Because in 6 months of knowing him, he has shown me that perhaps we have confused caution with prejudice." "Prejudice?" Vespera nearly shouted. "We are predators. They are prey. This is not prejudice, it is biology." "Is it?" Seraphine shot back. "We feed on them, yes, but we do not need to kill. We have not needed to kill for survival in over a century, not since we developed methods of feeding that leave humans alive and their memories intact. So what makes them fundamentally lesser? Their mortality? Their lack of physical strength? By those measures, humans consider themselves superior to dozens of species, yet we would call such thinking narrow-minded." Council member Theron, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward. His eyes, golden like a hawk's, studied her carefully. "You speak of him as though you have revealed yourself to this human. Please tell me you have not been so foolish." Seraphine hesitated, and in that hesitation, the council found their answer. The chamber erupted. Voices overlapped, some shouting in languages dead for centuries. Elder Malaches raised his hand, and silence fell immediately. "You have broken our most fundamental law," he said quietly, which was somehow more terrifying than if he had yelled. "The law of shadow, which has protected our kind since the burning times. You have revealed yourself to a human." "I have," Seraphine admitted, raising her chin. "And he has kept the secret, as I knew he would. Because I chose carefully. Because I understood the risk and deemed him trustworthy." "You deemed him trustworthy?" Vespera laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "A vampire barely past her second century believes she can judge the character of a human after mere months? Your arrogance is astounding." "My arrogance?" Seraphine's eyes flashed. "Is it not arrogant to assume all humans are the same? To paint an entire species with a single brush based on the actions of some? We claim to be more evolved, yet we engage in the very tribalism we mock them for." Theron stood, his movement fluid and dangerous. "Tell us, Lady Nightshade, did you reveal yourself before or after you developed feelings for this mortal?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Seraphine knew this was the crux of the matter, the point that would determine whether the council saw her as a rational actor making a calculated decision, or as a fool blinded by emotion. "After," she admitted. "I came to care for him as I knew him. But it was not my feelings that convinced me to reveal myself. It was his character, his integrity, and yes, my understanding that continuing to see him while maintaining the deception would be a betrayal of the very qualities I valued in him." "How romantic," Vespera sneered. "And when he ages, when he dies, what then? Will you turn him, violating another sacred law? Will you watch him wither while you remain unchanged? Or will you simply drain him when his usefulness expires?" "Vespera, that is enough," Theron interjected, though his expression remained stern as he turned back to Seraphine. "But the question, crudely as it was put, is valid. What is your intention?" Seraphine had known this question would come. She had spent countless nights contemplating it, watching Dorian sleep in her arms, counting the beats of his heart and knowing that someday, perhaps someday soon in the scope of her long life, that heart would stop beating. "I don't know," she said honestly. "The laws forbid turning humans without council approval, a law I agree with. Creating new vampires should not be done lightly or for selfish reasons. But I also believe that law was created assuming we view humans as lesser beings. If we instead see them as equals, different but not inferior, then perhaps the question of turning becomes not one of elevation but of choice." "His choice." "Impossible," Elder Malaches stated flatly. "You ask us to overturn centuries of law on the basis of your personal feelings for one human. If we allow this, what precedent does it set? Should every vampire be permitted to reveal themselves to any human they fancy? Should we throw open the doors to our world and hope for the best?" "No," Seraphine said firmly. "I'm not asking for the laws to be abolished entirely. I'm asking for them to be examined and perhaps reformed. There should be standards, requirements, safeguards. But those safeguards should be based on wisdom and practicality, not on outdated assumptions about an entire species." Council member Lysandra, who had not yet spoken, rose from her seat. She was ancient, older even than Malaches, and her presence commanded immediate attention. Her voice, when she spoke, was surprisingly gentle. "Child, I was turned during the reign of Augustus Caesar. I have watched empires rise and fall. I have seen humans at their best and their worst. I have also seen vampires at both extremes. You are not wrong that we are capable of prejudice, of cruelty, of the very narrow-mindedness we claim to have evolved past." Hope flickered in Seraphine's chest. Lysandra continued, "However, the laws you challenge were not written by tyrants seeking to oppress. They were written in blood, learned through painful experience. In Rome, we lived openly among humans, some of us even holding positions of power. Do you know what happened?" Seraphine did know. Every vampire learned this history. "The purges," she said quietly. "The purges," Lysandra confirmed. "When humans discovered what we were, when fear and superstition took hold, thousands of our kind were destroyed. Entire bloodlines ended. The survivors went into hiding, and from that hiding we created the laws that protect us today. So you must understand, it is not hatred that drives these laws. It is memory. It is trauma. It is the hard-learned lesson that humans, when they fear us, will destroy us. But that was 2,000 years ago, Seraphine argued. Humans have changed. They're more rational now, more rational. Theron interrupted. They war over resources, ideology, and territory. They destroy their own environment. They oppress each other over the most trivial differences. Yes, they have advanced technologically, but have they truly evolved beyond the fear and violence that drove them to nearly extinct us? Some have, Seraphine insisted. Not all, perhaps not even most, but some. And is it not worth acknowledging those humans who have evolved? Is it not worth considering that our blanket prohibitions might be as prejudiced as the humans who once hunted us? The council chamber fell silent. Seraphine could feel the weight of their consideration, the centuries of experience and pain that informed their decisions. Finally, Elder Malachus spoke. You will bring this human before us. We will question him, test him, and determine whether he is truly as exceptional as you believe. If he passes our examination, we will consider your request for a formal hearing on the matter. If he fails, or if we determine he poses a threat to our kind, he will be dealt with according to our laws. Seraphine's blood ran cold. She knew what dealt with meant. Memory alteration at best, death at worst. And if I refuse to bring him before you, then you will be declaring yourself in rebellion against the council, Malachus said simply. And you will both be hunted as threats to our kind. Is that what you want? It was not what she wanted, but neither could she simply hand Dorian over to the council like a specimen to be examined. She thought of him, probably at his bookstore right now, shelving books and helping customers find stories that would transport them to other worlds. He had no idea that the woman he loved was standing in a chamber beneath the streets of Manhattan, arguing for his life. She had told him what she was 3 months ago, on a cool October evening in his apartment. They had been seeing each other regularly, and the deception had become unbearable. She remembered the fear in her chest as she'd let her fangs descend, as her eyes had shifted from their human disguise to their true silver. He had been startled, yes, but not terrified. Instead, he had studied her face with that same curious intensity he brought to everything, and then he had asked, "Does it hurt?" The transformation. Of all the questions he might have asked, that one had surprised her most. Not, "Are you going to kill me?" or "How is this possible?" but concern for whether her nature caused her pain. "No," she had answered. "Not anymore. It did, when I was first turned. But I've long since adjusted." They had talked through the night, him asking questions with academic fascination and genuine care, her answering as honestly as she dared. When dawn had approached and she'd needed to leave, he had kissed her and said, "Thank you for trusting me. I know what this means." She had believed him then. She believed him now. But would the council? "I will bring him," Seraphine said finally. "But I want assurances. He is not to be harmed. He is not to have his memories altered unless he consents. And he is to be treated with the respect due any being, not as an experiment or a threat." "You are in no position to make demands," Vespera snapped. "On the contrary," Lysandra interjected, surprising everyone. "She is in exactly the position to make such demands. If we truly believe we are better than the humans who once hunted us, then we must prove it through our actions. We will grant your request, Lady Nightshade. The human will not be harmed without cause, and any alteration of his memories will require his understanding and consent. You have 3 days to prepare him and bring him before us." Malachus looked as though he wanted to argue, but Lysandra's word carried weight even he could not easily dismiss. 3 days, he agreed reluctantly. "But know this, Lady Seraphine. If this human proves to be anything less than what you claim, the consequences will be severe, for both of you." Seraphine bowed, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. "I understand. Thank you, Elder Lysandra, council members. I will not disappoint you." As she turned to leave the chamber, Theron's voice stopped her. "Lady Nightshade, one more thing. Why him? Of all the humans in this city, in this world, why this particular man? Seraphine paused, considering the question. Why Dorian? She could list his qualities, his intelligence, his kindness, his integrity. But that wasn't really the answer, was it? Because, she said slowly, when I am with him, I remember what it was like to be human. Not the weakness or the fragility, but the hope. The ability to see wonder in the mundane. The capacity to care deeply even knowing that everything is temporary. He reminds me that mortality is not a weakness but a perspective, one that gives meaning to the time we have. And I believe that is a perspective we have lost, we who have unlimited time. Perhaps that is what he offers us all, if we are willing to see it. With that, she left the chamber, ascending the stone stairs that led back to the surface world. The night air of Manhattan greeted her, crisp and cold and alive with the sounds of humanity. Somewhere out there, Dorian was living his life, unaware that in 3 days, he would stand before a council of immortals and be judged worthy or wanting. She pulled out her phone, a concession to modern times that still felt strange after centuries of slower communication. She typed a message, "We need to talk. Can you come over tonight?" His response came quickly, "Is everything okay?" She stared at the screen, considering how to answer. Nothing was okay. Everything had become infinitely complicated. But she typed back, "It will be. I'll explain everything tonight." "I'll be there in an hour," he replied, followed by a heart emoji that made her smile despite the gravity of the situation. An hour gave her time to think, to plan. She returned to her apartment, a penthouse that offered both luxury and the security necessary for someone of her kind. The windows were treated to block harmful UV rays, the doors reinforced with steel that could withstand a vampire's strength. It was a fortress that looked like a home. Much like her own existence was a carefully crafted illusion that hid a deeper truth. She poured herself a glass of synthesized blood from her refrigerator, another modern convenience that had made their kind's existence easier. No need to hunt, no risk of killing. Of course, some of the older vampires scorned such methods, claiming it lacked the intimacy of feeding from a living source. Seraphine understood their perspective but didn't share it. She had killed enough in her early years, before control and ethics had tempered her hunger. The door buzzed precisely an hour later. Dorian was nothing if not punctual. She let him in, and he entered with his characteristic energy, carrying a bag from their favorite Thai restaurant. "I figured if we needed to talk, we might as well eat," he said, then caught her expression. "Okay, I might as well eat. Are you sure everything's okay? You look worried." She helped him set out the food, buying herself time to organize her thoughts. How did you tell someone that they were about to be judged by a secret society of immortals? That their relationship had triggered a potential crisis in a world they barely understood? "I told you about the council," she began, sitting across from him at her dining table. "The governing body of my kind." He nodded, opening a container of pad thai. "The Vampire UN, you called it. What about them? They know about you. About us. And they want to meet you." Dorian paused, noodles halfway to his mouth. "Ah, that sounds ominous." "It could be," she admitted. "The law I broke by revealing myself to you, it's not just a suggestion. It's one of our most fundamental rules, written in the aftermath of centuries of persecution. By telling you what I am, I've challenged that law, and by extension, challenged the council's authority." He set down his fork, giving her his full attention. "What does that mean for you? For us?" "It means they want to evaluate you. To determine if you're trustworthy, if you pose a threat to our kind. Depending on their judgment, they could allow our relationship to continue, they could alter your memories of me, or—" She trailed off. "Or they could kill me," he finished calmly. "I won't let that happen," Seraphine said fiercely. "Hey!" Dorian reached across the table, taking her hand. His palm was warm, alive, so different from her own cool skin. "I knew the risks when you told me the truth. Maybe not specifically that there was a vampire council that might take issue with our relationship, but I knew that your world came with dangers. I chose to stay anyway." "This isn't just about danger," Seraphine said, squeezing his hand. It's about them judging whether you're worthy, whether a human can be trusted with knowledge of our existence. And I hate that I've put you in this position." Dorian was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he surprised her by smiling slightly. "So I need to make a good impression on your family. That's basically what this is, right? Meeting the in-laws, except they're ancient vampires who could crush me like a bug." "Despite everything," Seraphine laughed. "That's one way of looking at it." "What will they ask me? What should I prepare for?" "I don't know exactly," she admitted. "They'll test your character, your ability to keep secrets, probably your motivations for being with me. They'll want to determine if you're a threat." "Am I?" he asked seriously. "A threat, I mean, to your kind?" It was a question Seraphine had considered. To the status quo, yes. If you and I can successfully navigate this, if we can prove that humans and vampires can coexist in relationships of genuine equality and partnership, it challenges everything the Council has believed for millennia. That's threatening to them. But not threatening as in, I'm going to expose vampires to the world? "No," Seraphine said firmly. "You're one of the least threatening people I've ever met, which is one of the many reasons I love you." The words hung in the air between them. They had said them before, but never quite like this, never with so much weight behind them. "I love you too," Dorian said quietly. "Which means I'll meet your council, answer their questions, and do whatever it takes to prove that I'm trustworthy. Not just for us, but because—" He paused, searching for words. "Because if I understand correctly, you're not just fighting for our relationship. You're fighting to change laws that you believe are unjust. That's bigger than us." "It is," Seraphine confirmed. "And that makes it dangerous. If you want to walk away, I understand. I can have your memories altered gently, and you'll remember me as just a wealthy woman you dated briefly. You'll be safe." Dorian shook his head immediately. "I'm not walking away. These past 6 months have been the most extraordinary of my life. You've shown me a world I never imagined existed, challenged my assumptions about reality, and made me happier than I knew I could be. I'm not giving that up because things got complicated." Seraphine felt something in her chest that might have been her heart, if it still beat regularly. This man, this fragile mortal with his 70 or 80 years if he was lucky, was willing to stand before beings who had lived for millennia, willing to be judged and tested, all because he loved her and believed in what she was fighting for. "You need to understand something," she said seriously. "The council members are not like me. Some of them are thousands of years old. They've seen empires fall, witnessed the worst of humanity, and developed a perspective that makes them seem cold, even cruel. Don't expect mercy or warmth from them." "Noted," Dorian said. "Any other tips for making a good impression on ancient vampires?" Theron's expression was unreadable. Finally, he stepped back. "Follow me, and human. Do not disappoint her. She has risked much for you." They entered the council chamber, and Dorian's step faltered slightly at the sight. The space was vast, pillared with marble, lit by the ancient chandelier Seraphine had described. And seated in a semicircle were the council members, their presence filling the room with an almost physical weight of power and age. "Approach," Elder Malachus commanded. Seraphine and Dorian walked forward, stopping at the designated mark on the floor. Seraphine bowed, and after a moment, Dorian did the same. "Mr. Ashford," Malachus began, his voice echoing through the chamber, "do you understand why you have been brought before this council?" "Yes, Elder," Dorian replied, remembering the proper form of address Seraphine had taught him. "Lady Seraphine revealed her nature to me, which violated your law of shadow. I am here to be evaluated as to whether I pose a threat to your people." "And do you?" Vespera asked sharply. "Pose a threat?" "Not intentionally," Dorian said carefully. "I understand that your laws exist to protect your kind from persecution, a persecution that history shows was brutal and extensive. I have no desire to expose your existence or cause harm to your people." "Not intentionally," Vespera repeated mockingly. What about unintentionally? What happens when you get drunk and tell a friend? When you argue with Lady Seraphine and seek revenge? When you write about us in your little books? I don't drink to excess, I don't seek revenge when relationships encounter difficulties, and I understand the difference between fiction and reality, Dorian responded calmly. But I understand your concern. You've lived long enough to see humans at their worst, to understand how we react when we're afraid or angry. All I can offer is my word, my character, and my understanding of what's at stake. Your word, Vespera scoffed. The word of a human who has known our kind for mere months. 6 months, Dorian corrected gently. Which is not long, I agree. But in that time, I've learned about your culture, your laws, your history. I've seen both the beauty and the burden of immortality. And I've fallen in love with someone who has shown me kindness, intelligence, and integrity. My word is built on that foundation. Lysandra leaned forward, studying him intently. You speak of love. Do you understand that if this relationship continues, you will age while Lady Seraphine remains unchanged? Do you understand that you will die while she lives on? How does a mortal cope with that reality? It was a question Dorian had clearly considered. Every relationship between mortals faces the same truth eventually. One person will likely die before the other. The difference here is one of scale, but not of kind. We all choose to love knowing that loss is inevitable. I choose to love Seraphine knowing that my time is limited, that I'll age while she doesn't, because the alternative is to reject happiness out of fear of future pain. That seems like a cowardly choice to me. The council was silent, processing this response. Finally, Theron spoke. You researched vampire history, specifically the persecutions. Why? Because I wanted to understand your perspective, Dorian explained. Lady Seraphine told me about the purges, about vampires being hunted and destroyed. But I wanted to see the primary sources, the historical records of what actually happened. What I found was chilling. The witch hunts, the vampire panics, entire villages destroyed because of rumors and fear. I can't imagine surviving that, let alone watching it happen to your people, your friends, your family. He paused, then continued. That's why I understand the law of shadow, even if I'm asking you to reconsider parts of it. You're not being paranoid or prejudiced. You're being careful, based on lived experience. The question is whether that experience, as valid as it is, should define all interactions between our species forever, or whether there might be room for evolution. Evolution, Elder Malliches repeated thoughtfully. An interesting word choice. Tell me, Mr. Ashford, what do you think we should evolve toward? Coexistence based on mutual respect rather than fear, Dorian said. Not throwing open the doors and revealing vampires to all of humanity, nothing that reckless. But perhaps recognizing that some humans can be trusted with the truth, that relationships between our species don't have to be solely predator and prey, that there might be value in what each species can teach the other. And what, Vespera asked acidly, could humans possibly teach us? We who have lived for centuries, who have mastered arts and sciences beyond your comprehension. Dorian met her hostile gaze steadily. Perspective. The value of limited time. Innovation born of necessity. The strength that comes from fragility. The courage it takes to build and create and love knowing that everything is temporary. Vampires are magnificent, powerful, wise in ways I can barely imagine. But immortality has costs too, doesn't it? The distance from humanity, the weight of centuries, the tendency to see mortals as mayflies. Perhaps what we offer is a reminder of what it means to be truly alive. The chamber fell silent. Seraphine glanced at Dorian, pride and fear warring in her chest. He had spoken beautifully, honestly, demonstrating both respect and courage. But would it be enough? Elder Lysandra stood, and all eyes turned to her. She descended from her seat, approaching Dorian directly. At her full height, she towered over him, and her age seemed to radiate from her like heat. I was 23 when I was turned, she said quietly. A long time ago, in a world very different from this one. I was a slave in a Roman household, property with no rights, no future, no hope. My master turned me not out of love but because he found me amusing. And yet, that terrible act gave me something I never had as a human. Freedom. Power. The ability to choose my own path. She paused, her ancient eyes searching Dorian's face. I tell you this because I want you to understand that I know what it means to be seen as lesser, to be property rather than a person. And I also know that perspectives can change. The Romans believed slavery was natural, inevitable, the foundation of civilization. They were wrong. So when you speak of evolution, of reconsidering our laws, you speak to something I understand deeply. Lysandra turned to address the entire council. This human has done something remarkable. He has not come here to beg for his life or to flatter us. He has come to engage with our history, our trauma, and our laws with respect and intelligence. He asks us to evolve not because he thinks we are wrong, but because he believes we are capable of it. Is that not worth considering? It is a pretty speech, Vespera countered. But words are easy. Actions reveal truth. What guarantee do we have that this human will keep our secrets when it becomes difficult? When he is threatened? When money or fame is offered for information about us? No guarantee, Dorian admitted, surprising everyone. There is no way to absolutely guarantee my future behavior, just as there's no way to guarantee the future behavior of any being, vampire or human. All I can offer is my character, as demonstrated by my past actions, and my understanding of what's at stake. But if you need more than that, then perhaps the question isn't whether I'm trustworthy, but whether your laws allow for any human to be trustworthy, which seems like a prejudgment rather than a judgment. Theron laughed, a sound like distant thunder. Bold, for someone in your position. You criticize our laws while standing before those who could end you. I criticize the assumption underlying the laws, Dorian clarified. The laws themselves make sense given that assumption. But if the assumption is flawed, then the laws built upon it might also be flawed. That's not an attack, it's an observation. Elder Malachus raised his hand, and silence fell. You have answered our questions adequately, Mr. Ashford. Now I have one final test for you. Council Member Vespera will attempt to enter your mind, to read your true thoughts and intentions. It will be uncomfortable but not harmful. Do you consent? Dorian glanced at Seraphine, who looked stricken. They hadn't discussed this possibility. Mind reading was an intimate violation, one that would expose every thought, every doubt, every secret Dorian possessed. What exactly will she see? Dorian asked carefully. Everything, Vespera said with evident satisfaction. Your thoughts about Lady Seraphine, about us, about this situation. Every lie you've told, every secret you keep, every dark impulse you've hidden. Your mind will be an open book. Dorian was silent for a long moment, and Seraphine could see him wrestling with the decision. Finally, he spoke. If I refuse, you'll assume I have something to hide, and you'll either alter my memories or kill me. If I agree, you'll see things that are private, personal, perhaps embarrassing. But you'll also see the truth of who I am. He took a breath. I consent. But I want to make something clear first. You're going to see my doubts, my fears, my moments of weakness. You're going to see that I'm not some perfect paragon of virtue. I'm going to ask that you judge me not on my worst thoughts but on my choices, on the actions I take despite those thoughts. Because that's what character actually is. Not the absence of darkness, but what we do with it. Agreed, Lysandra said before Vespera could respond. We will judge you on the totality of what we see, not on isolated thoughts taken out of context. Vespera approached Dorian, her expression predatory. She placed her pale hands on either side of his head, her nails sharp against his skin. This will hurt, she warned, and then her eyes went black. Dorian gasped, his body going rigid. Seraphine moved instinctively to help him, but Theron blocked her path. Let it happen, he commanded. Seraphine could only watch as Vespera rifled through Dorian's mind, seeing everything he was, everything he'd been, everything he feared. Seconds stretched into minutes, and Dorian's face contorted with discomfort and pain. Finally, Vespera released him, and he staggered. Seraphine was there immediately, catching him before he fell. What did you see? Malachus demanded. Vespera's expression was complex, hard to read. I saw a man who is terrified of losing Lady Seraphine, who lies awake at night counting the decades he has left, knowing she will outlive him by centuries, who sometimes resents her immortality even as he loves her, who has had moments of doubt about whether this relationship is wise. She paused, and the council leaned forward. I also saw a man who has never once considered betraying her, who has researched methods of keeping secrets under torture, under interrogation, under any circumstances, who has already planned what he would say if ever questioned about her, lies he would tell to protect her, who loves her so completely that he would rather die than harm her or her kind. The chamber was silent as Vespera continued. He has darkness in him, yes. Jealousy, fear, moments of small cruelty in his past. But his choices, his actions, are consistently aligned with his values. He is. She seemed to struggle with the admission, trustworthy. Annoyingly, frustratingly trustworthy. Elder Malachus looked to the other council members. We must deliberate. Lady Seraphine, Mr. Ashford, please wait outside the chamber. They were escorted out by Theron, back to a small anteroom carved from the stone. As soon as they were alone, Seraphine pulled Dorian into her arms. Are you all right? What was it like? Like having someone rifle through every drawer in my mind, Dorian said, his voice shaky. Every embarrassing memory, every petty thought, every moment I'm not proud of. It was violating, but... He paused, also oddly liberating. No more secrets. They know exactly who I am, flaws and all. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Seraphine said. I should have anticipated they might use mind reading. It's okay, Dorian assured her. If that's what it takes to prove I'm trustworthy, it was worth it. Did you hear what Vespera said? I passed. The hostile one admitted I passed. You did more than pass, Seraphine said. You challenged them to be better, to reconsider laws they've held for millennia. Even if the council rules against us, you've planted seeds of doubt, of possibility. They waited for what felt like hours but was probably less than one. Finally, Theron returned. The council has reached a decision. They followed him back into the chamber, where the council members had resumed their seats. Elder Malachus looked grave as he spoke. Mr. Dorian Ashford, this council has considered your testimony, your character, and the contents of your mind. We have also considered Lady Seraphine's arguments regarding the nature and purpose of our laws. We have reached a decision that is not unanimous but represents the majority view. He paused, and Seraphine felt Dorian's hand find hers, their fingers intertwining. We find that you do not pose an immediate threat to our kind. Your character, while imperfect as all beings are imperfect, demonstrates integrity and loyalty. Therefore, you will be permitted to retain your memories and your life. Relief flooded through Seraphine, but Malachus wasn't finished. However, this decision comes with conditions. First, you will submit to periodic evaluations by this council, at intervals we determine, to ensure you remain trustworthy. Second, you will take a binding oath, enforced by magic older than civilization, never to reveal the existence of our kind to any other human without explicit permission from this council. Third, you will accept certain modifications to your mind that will make it impossible for you to be compelled or tortured into revealing our secrets. You will speak of us only when you consciously choose to do so. I accept those conditions, Dorian said without hesitation. Finally, Malachus continued, regarding Lady Seraphine's broader arguments about reforming our laws, the Council has agreed to establish a commission to review the law of shadow and related statutes. This commission will examine whether our laws might be modified to allow for, under strict conditions and oversight, relationships between vampires and humans where both parties are aware of the vampire's nature. Seraphine's eyes widened. It wasn't everything she'd hoped for, but it was more than she'd dared expect. A commission, a formal review, the possibility of change. Lady Seraphine, you will chair this commission, Lysandra added. You have demonstrated both respect for our traditions and the courage to question them. You will work with council members from various bloodlines and ages to propose reforms that balance our need for secrecy with your ideals of equity and possibility. I'm honored, Elder Lysandra, Seraphine said, bowing deeply. Thank you, all of you, for considering these arguments. Do not thank us yet, Vespera said coldly. This is an experiment, and experiments can fail. If your human proves untrustworthy, if your commission's recommendations compromise our security, the consequences will be severe. You have been given an opportunity, Lady Seraphine. Do not waste it. I won't, Seraphine promised. Then we are concluded, Malachus declared. Mr. Ashford, approach for the oath and modifications. Dorian walked forward, and Seraphine watched as Lysandra performed the ancient ritual, words and languages predating Latin, magic that settled over Dorian like a second skin. She saw him flinch as the mental modifications took hold, protections that would keep vampire secrets locked in his mind behind walls that even he couldn't consciously break. When it was done, Dorian returned to her side, looking exhausted but relieved. You may go, Malachus said. Remember, you are both under observation now. Your relationship is being watched not just by this council but by our entire kind. You are pioneers in uncertain territory. Walk carefully. They left the council chamber together, ascending the ancient stairs back toward the modern world. Neither spoke until they emerged onto the streets of Manhattan, where the night was still young and humans moved about obliviously, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded beneath their feet. We did it, Dorian finally said, disbelief in his voice. We actually did it. You did it, Seraphine corrected. Your honesty, your courage, your willingness to understand their perspective while still challenging their assumptions. You changed ancient minds tonight, Dorian. We changed them together, he insisted. You were the one brave enough to break their law in the first place, to love someone you weren't supposed to love. They walked through the city, hand in hand, processing everything that had happened. Eventually, they found themselves at Dorian's bookstore, closed for the night but welcoming in its familiarity. Inside, surrounded by books and the smell of old paper, Dorian pulled Seraphine close. So what happens now? You chair a commission, we get evaluated periodically, and we try to prove that different species can build something real together. That's exactly what happens, Seraphine confirmed. It won't be easy. There will be vampires who oppose any change, humans who would destroy us if they knew we existed, and 1,000 complications we haven't even imagined yet. But we'll face them together, Dorian said. Together, Seraphine agreed, kissing him softly. In the weeks that followed, Seraphine threw herself into the work of the commission. She recruited vampires from different bloodlines, different eras, different perspectives. Some were conservative, believing any change was dangerous. Others were progressive, eager to challenge old restrictions. Together, they began the painstaking work of examining centuries of law and tradition. The debates were fierce. Elder Malachus attended every session, his presence a reminder of the council's authority. Vespera came too, arguing passionately against most proposed changes. But slowly, gradually, a picture began to emerge of what reformed laws might look like. Not universal permission for vampires to reveal themselves to humans. That would be reckless. But a path for petitioning the council, demonstrating that a particular human met specific criteria for trustworthiness. A system of evaluation and oversight, similar to what Dorian had undergone. Protections for both parties, consequences for betrayal. It's like a visa system, Dorian observed one night as Seraphine explained the latest proposals. Not everyone gets approved, but there's a legitimate path for those who qualify. Exactly, Seraphine confirmed. It maintains security while allowing for exceptions based on merit. 3 months into the commission's work, they held a presentation for the full council. Seraphine stood before the same assembly that had judged her and Dorian, but this time she carried not just personal conviction but months of research, debate, and careful policy crafting. Honored elders, she began, the commission presents its preliminary recommendations for reform of the law of shadow. She outlined the proposed changes: a petition process, evaluation criteria, magical protections for humans who were informed, severe consequences for vampires who revealed themselves without permission or for humans who betrayed their trust. These reforms maintain our fundamental commitment to secrecy, Seraphine explained. But they recognize that absolute prohibition may be neither necessary nor beneficial. In a world where humans and vampires increasingly share spaces, where technology makes accidental discovery more likely, having a framework for deliberate, controlled disclosure may actually enhance our security rather than threaten it. Theron raised his hand. You speak of shared spaces and technology. Elaborate. In the past, Seraphine said, we could disappear into the night, avoid detection through simple distance. Now, facial recognition, DNA analysis, digital surveillance make true invisibility nearly impossible. Some vampires advocate for withdrawal from human society entirely. But I believe integration, careful and controlled, is safer than isolation. Better to have humans who know and are bound by oaths than humans who suspect and investigate. It was a strategic argument, framing the reforms not as idealistic but as pragmatic, security-enhancing rather than security-threatening. The debate lasted hours. Vampires who had lived through the burning times spoke of their trauma, their fear of exposure. Younger vampires talked about the challenges of maintaining cover in the modern world. Humans who had been brought before the council, like Dorian, offered their perspectives on what motivations might drive disclosure and what protections might prevent it. Finally, Elder Lysandra called for a vote. All those in favor of implementing a trial period of these reforms, with evaluation after 5 years, indicate your support. Hands rose around the chamber. Not unanimously, Vespera and several other conservatives abstained. But a clear majority supported the trial. The reforms are approved, Malachas declared. Lady Seraphine will oversee implementation. Mr. Ashford will serve as a consultant and the first official test case. May your experiment prove successful. That night, in Seraphine's apartment, they celebrated quietly. Dorian opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. To changing the world, one ancient vampire law at a time, he toasted. To being brave enough to love someone different, Seraphine countered, touching her glass to his. They drank, and Dorian asked the question that had been lingering between them for months. What about the other law? The one about turning humans? Seraphine had known this question would come eventually. The law of transformation was even more sacrosanct than the law of shadow. Vampires could only create new vampires with council permission, granted rarely and only after extensive evaluation. That's a much harder battle, she admitted. Turning someone is irreversible, permanent. The council's concerns there are more serious. But you've thought about it, Dorian said. It wasn't a question. I've thought about it, Seraphine confirmed. About watching you age while I remain unchanged. About the possibility of losing you after such a short time together. About whether offering you immortality would be a gift or a curse. And what did you conclude? Seraphine set down her glass, taking his hands in hers. That it should be your choice. Not mine, not the council's, but yours. If that time comes, when age begins to limit you, when mortality becomes less theoretical and more immediate, we'll discuss it. And if you want to be turned, I'll fight the council for permission, just as I fought them for the right to tell you what I am. And if I don't want it? Dorian asked quietly. If I choose to remain human, to live my natural span? Then I'll treasure every moment we have, Seraphine said, her voice thick with emotion. I'll watch you grow old, I'll hold your hand at the end, and I'll remember you for all my remaining centuries. Loving someone mortal means accepting that loss is inevitable. But the alternative is never loving at all, and that seems worse. Dorian pulled her close, and they sat together in comfortable silence, two beings from different species, different lifespans, different worlds, who had somehow found each other and decided that love was worth fighting for. Over the following years, the reforms Seraphine had championed began to change vampire society in subtle but significant ways. More vampires applied for permission to reveal themselves to trusted humans. Some were approved, others were denied. The system wasn't perfect, but it was working. Dorian became something of a minor celebrity in vampire circles, the human who had challenged the council and lived. He used his unique position to advocate for understanding between species, giving talks to vampire gatherings about human culture, psychology, and the benefits of carefully managed integration. His bookstore became a quiet meeting place where vampires and approved humans could interact, carefully and under observation, but more freely than ever before. It was a small thing, But Seraphine believed small things accumulated into larger change. 5 years after that first council meeting, they stood together once again in the council chamber for the evaluation of the reform trial period. "The numbers speak clearly," Seraphine reported. 23 vampires have been granted permission to reveal themselves to human partners or close friends. Of those 23 cases, 0 have resulted in exposure of our kind. Several have resulted in significant benefits: medical knowledge, technological assistance, and improved integration into human society. "Any problems?" Malachas asked. 3 cases of humans requiring additional mental reinforcement of their oaths, Seraphine admitted. Not because they wanted to betray us, but because they discussed matters too freely with others they trusted. The reinforcements reminded them of the boundaries. No permanent harm was done. "And the general impact on our security?" Theron asked. "Neutral to slightly positive," a security specialist reported. "Having humans who are aware and bound by oaths has actually helped us identify and neutralize several investigations into unusual activity. They serve as, essentially, early warning systems." The council debated, but the outcome was clear even before the vote. The reforms had worked. They would be made permanent, though with continued oversight and adjustment. As they left the chamber that night, Dorian, now 40 years old to Seraphine's eternally young appearance, he squeezed her hand. "We did it. We actually changed their minds." "We showed them a better way," Seraphine corrected. "They changed their own minds because the evidence supported it. That's how real change happens, Dorian. Not through revolution, but through patient demonstration that alternatives are possible." "You know," Dorian said thoughtfully, "when I first met you 5 years ago, I never imagined that knowing you would mean becoming part of a civil rights movement for vampire-human relations." Seraphine laughed. "And I never imagined that falling in love would turn me into a political activist. Life surprises us, even when we have centuries to experience it." They walked through Manhattan together, past buildings Seraphine had seen rise from empty ground, through streets Dorian had known all his life. Different species, different lifespans, but united in the belief that understanding was possible, that love could bridge any divide, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply refusing to accept that things had to be the way they'd always been. Above them, the city lights blazed against the night sky, and somewhere in the darkness, other vampires and humans were having conversations like theirs, building relationships that defied ancient laws, proving that change was not just possible but inevitable. And in the depths beneath the city, in chambers older than civilization, the council watched and learned and slowly, reluctantly, grew. Because that was the thing about immortality. You had all the time in the world to change, if you were brave enough to try.